after last week talking about Jesus ascending into heaven, like I said, we're going to deep dive into the details regarding heaven, where he has now gone to. But I thought I'd start by mentioning that it's kind of sad that not all Christians believe in an eternal destination, heaven or hell. Or I've realized through this study that a lot of Christians falsely believe that it's a state of mind, or other false beliefs like everyone will go there, it doesn't matter what you've done, everybody wins, whatever. But I thought that was interesting because even believers are deceived. And I heard one author, Randy Alcorn, he wrote a book called Heaven. I think it's called Heaven. He blames this disillusionment of heaven, even amongst believers, on Satan. Because Satan is, his quote, desires confusion about and even ignorance of heaven. Therefore, he continues to write, he labors to give believers an inaccurate view of heaven, just as he does regarding the person of God and the words of God. That was the deceit from the beginning. Heaven is also part of Satan's plan to deceive, make us ignorant of. But it makes sense because he got kicked out of heaven, right? Doesn't want others to gain what he's lost. He wants us to believe, I don't need a savior. I just need to be good. I just need to be morally uncorrupt, pay enough, do enough, be enough, whatever. Because if there's that sense of false belief that they're comfortable with, then they don't have to seek the truth. And most of us in here know that the truth is that Jesus said himself, he's the way, the truth, the life, and none go to the Father but through him, through acceptance of what he did on the cross. Okay, and people are naturally designed to seek truth. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says that Jesus designed us, God designed us. He set eternity in the hearts of men. Yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. What does that say? In other words, God has wired us with this eternal desire, like a homing instinct, right? And truthfully, if people knew the reality of an eternal heaven and eternal hell, they would absolutely be seeking the truth. But based on this verse, sadly, too many settle for something that's more easily understood by our limited brain capacity. Because we can't wrap our brains around a reality that we can't see or touch or truly understand, right? In fact, C.S. Lewis wrote, our ability to imagine what eternity will be like is like two infants in the womb talking about what they will be doing once they're born and 25 years old. Like it's unfathomable. Their brain doesn't have the capacity to imagine or go that far, right? Ours is the same. We just don't have that capacity. But seeking the truth of what heaven should be a driving force of our understanding of God, not only for who we are and what we do here in the present, but what is our future. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What is our forever home like? What is it? And we're going to talk about what the Bible teaches us about heaven. And kicking it off, number one, it's a real place. It seems obvious to say that, but I want to put some scripture behind that. Jesus himself told his disciples right before his crucifixion that he would be leaving them in order to go prepare a place for them, right? John 14:2 then says, in my Father's house, in this place, he's continuing, in my Father's house there are many mansions, and if not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? So in other words, Jesus saying, I cannot lie to you, so this place is real and is prepared by me. I wouldn't have said it. I couldn't have said that. I couldn't have expressed these words from truth if they weren't true, right? So in other words, it's prepared by him. It means that Jesus will put thought and design and personal consideration into this place. And just as the meticulous details went into creating and developing this earth and universe for our existence, the same thoughtful design is behind heaven. I could go into so much scientific detail about that, but just use your imagination. What we know about science, gravity, all the electromagnetic field, all the things that keep our earth, the sun, I mean, that's prepared for our existence here, to breathe, to live, and exist on earth, right? Same kind of meticulous design is going into heaven. Now, Jesus uses the Greek word mansions, but the Greek word for mansions is menoe or menee. I'm not sure how to say it, but it's not mansions as we think of today. So Jesus is not literally constructing these overpriced homes with massive square footage and elaborate decor. That's not what it means. The original Greek literally simply means dwellings. At this moment in time, he was assuring the disciples that when he comes back to get them, there will be a place, a mansion, meaning a dwelling. There will be a space for you, and by extension, all of God's children, all of us, to live together. That's the basis for what he's saying. He didn't say, notice, that he was going to go create a state of mind. But the word for place in Greek literally means a literal, tangible place. Greek matters, right? So Revelation 21 and part of 22 provide a more detailed description of this place that Jesus says, I've gone to prepare. And we're going to highlight from that today. I'm not going to go verse by verse. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but we're going to dive into the Apostle Paul and what he wrote in the book of Revelations. Do you know he was 90 years old when he wrote this, when he had these visions and transpired this into writing? And he did this after receiving this incredible vision of our future. Now, the first 20 chapters, John reveals the details of end times. This tribulation, judgment, weeping, wailing, Armageddon. All these dreadful warnings are put in place, right? Chapter 21 starts off a little bit like God saying, it's finished, I'm done. Everything I had set in motion is now complete. So Jesus rewards John with the glimpse of the reward for those who have remained faithful through all of this, right? So can you imagine the look on John's face after having all this devastation revealed to him, but then he's rewarded with that heavy burden by saying, but here is what you get in the end. And that's what I want us to have, that perspective as we're listening to these details. So, chapter 21 begins, verse 1, with a new eternal beginning for believers. Number 1, verse 1 says, now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. So the original earth and heaven, what we know of and think of and experience today, because they have been polluted by Satan, by sin, they will have to be obliterated by God. And God will create a whole new heaven and a whole new earth, pure and untainted by evil or corruption. I'm going to do a lot of Greek words today because they matter. So the Greek word for new here, new heaven, new earth, is kainos, which means quality of freshness or unused. One scholar writes about this, that God will use brand new materials to create a whole new, fresh atmosphere, unlike what we have even encountered today. So when John writes also, he says, I saw, we've talked about this word a lot. There's 3 versions of see or saw in Greek, right? John writes with the utmost, deepest I saw. He uses the Greek word eidon, which means discern clearly. So he's not just visualizing these things, he's understanding and comprehending the reality of them. In fact, throughout Revelation, John gets this private guided tour. And during this tour, he saw and he heard interactions, and he's saying it was in my right mind. So he's defending what he saw by saying, I may be 90, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And he uses the Greek to explain that. So he's basically saying this wasn't a hallucination, but a vivid encounter with a very real and tangible future. But what John saw would be difficult to translate into words that are adequate enough to truly paint a picture for us. And it's important to note that throughout this, John frequently uses the term like, because it would be impossible to describe another dimension without using symbols or symbolism that we can relate to and understand. But understand that may be like it, but it's connected to a genuine existence, a genuine reality that he is visualizing himself, okay? Nonetheless, John faithfully does his best to illustrate with words what he saw. So let's keep going. Verse 2, then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So not only is heaven is real, but number 2, heaven will be presented as a radiant bride. John uses this striking image of a bride all decked out, descending out of heaven, being handed over by God. Just think about that image for a second. I mean, most brides, most of us women know if we've got married or anybody we've known, our daughters have gotten married, they don't just spend a day getting ready for their wedding, right? It's years of dreaming and planning and searching for that perfect dress, that perfect hairstyle, that perfect makeup, the perfect venue. Everything has thought and preparation so that they feel and radiate this beauty on that day of their wedding, right? But alongside, if you've ever been to a wedding, alongside that physical transformation that we just are awestruck by on their wedding day, how often do you hear, oh, she's glowing? That bride is just glowing today. They radiate. That joy is radiating from within. And when you are at a wedding, who stares and watches as the groom when they know the bride is about to come down the aisle? Nobody. Everyone will turn their heads when this heaven, this New Jerusalem, starts descending from heaven, just like a bride is adorned and watched, right? It will capture our attention. But don't miss the subtle reference to this spiritual intimacy that's being described here using these particular illustrative words of a bride. See, a relationship between God and his children right now, his church, is being compared to that of a bride and groom. We've heard it elsewhere by Paul in Ephesians. But here, it's about a symbolic relational uniting between God and his people in heart and in mind and in body and spirit, just like a wedding of a bride and a groom. There's an intimacy that's being expressed in this moment that he presents heaven to us. And this presentation of this new divine space will be unique. This new divine space is going to be unique and utterly complete in nature. It's prepared to its fullest. It's not like a work in progress. It's not like a house that you take this long to build, you move into, and you still have all these things to do. You've heard the saying, mother, or necessity is the mother of invention, right? That drives our needs to create here on earth, right? But in heaven, it is prepared. All the needs are met. All of it's done. There's no space that will be left unconstructed, undone. There will be no need of human craftsmanship to add to it because God will have perfectly prepared it and designed. It's prepared in completion. It's move-in ready. It's a city perfectly designed for the people of God. And according to verse 2, this holy city called New Jerusalem, heaven will be visually stunning. That's number 3. These are very point blank points that I put on your outline because how do you do this? You just don't. I could do 20,000 points. But let's just put this one as heaven will be visually stunning. Let's talk about this sinful and perfect community for the people of God where we will interact together. So think of the most vibrant and alive, stunning city that you've ever visited. But take out the crime, take out the bad drivers, take out the traffic jams, take out the trash, eliminate the sewer smells, I remember going to New York City, and the first encounter I had with New York was like at midnight. It was all lit up. It was beautiful. But oh my gosh, guys, it stunk everywhere. You could smell the trash. You could smell the debris. You could smell the homeless. It was not fully sensory stimulating in a good way. Take all of that, right? And in verse 9, we know that an angel offers to show John around. And so this angel swoops John up to this high on this mountain to give him a better view. And this is where he starts to really describe the magnificent details of what I like to call an unedited, no need for AI creation. Okay. And the first thing John mentions is saying in verse 11, saying, having the glory of God, her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear of crystal. There's a lot in this verse, so let's break this down. John uses the Greek word phoster for light. It literally means light source or illuminator. In other words, what he's saying, having the glory of God, her light was, he's saying the light of the city originates from God himself. God is the light source. He's the illuminator of this glow, this city. But it seems odd that he compares it to jasper that is clear as crystal. Jasper is an opaque stone. You can't see through it. It's not transparent at all. And then he uses the word clear as crystal. Scholars say that it is possible that he's describing a diamond-like substance or glow. But it's important to note that in the Bible, why did he use jasper then? Because jasper is associated with pure divine presence all throughout the Bible. So he's very particular in his choice of use of gem right here. So this light is pure, it's untainted, and supernatural in nature is what he's saying. And beyond that, verse 12 tells us, John saw a great and high wall with 12 gates. Okay, great and high wall, 12 gates, 3 gates on each side, north, south, east, and west, and an angel standing at each gate, and the names of the 12 tribes of children of Israel on each gate. So I think we all know this wall is not for protection from enemies. There will not be any enemies. We know the gates will never be closed. People will come and go. It's for decorative purposes to frame the city. But the names of the tribes on the gates, that says that God will never forget the tribes of Israel. They're still his chosen people who have a special place in the redemption story, even though they screwed up so frequently. It's a testament to redemption. But this wall also has 12 foundations on it, scattered throughout, with the names of the 12 apostles written on them. So not only does he recognize the Old Testament tribes, but also gives recognition to the apostles. And he's uniting, what he's doing, he's uniting the faithful throughout all of history, throughout all of redemption story, saying they all had a role in getting to this space. And basically God's saying that like the church, like the New Testament church, New Jerusalem is also built and founded upon the apostles and their sacrifice for the sake of spreading the gospel. Now, I'm going to show you an image. It's not necessarily for visual accuracy, but just maybe a reference point of what this could look like. That's not it. That's it. So you have the foundation. You have the tribes listed on each gate. You have the apostles listed on each one. We'll go through all the other details, but this is a speculation of the awesomeness and the tribute that God is making to those that were directly called and responded to his call for being a part of that redemption story. I think it's pretty cool that they get referenced in that aspect. But let's keep going. It's so fascinating because this real place that John is seeing also has real dimensions. And we're going to go through what Revelation says about the dimensions. So the angel guiding John's tour takes out his gold measuring stick, so to speak, and reveals the ginormous size of the city. And I'm just going to break it down. According to verse 15, when you break it all down, the city is approximately, this thing coming down out of heaven, okay, is approximately 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles wide, and 1,500 miles high. So heaven is a cube. Some scholars say maybe it's a pyramid, but most scholars say, based on dimensions, based on everything we know, it appears to be a cube. The city is a cube. Why a cube? Why not a sphere like the planets or the moon? Well, if you look back at verse 3, when John first sees the new heaven descending, it also says that as it's descending, he heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, so look at this thing coming at you, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. Okay, so think about this. Heaven will be the tabernacle of God's never-ending presence, right? It makes sense that God would design it with these specific dimensions because in the Old Testament, the original tabernacle was where God dwelt, right? This tabernacle that they had to build had an outer court, an inner court, and within the inner court, there was an inner room that was called the Holy of Holies. This Holy of Holies is where God's presence dwelt, right? That inner room is where only one priest could enter and only once a year in order to be in the presence of God. That inner room, that Holy of Holies, was 15 feet wide by 15 feet deep by 15 feet wide. Also a cube. I think that's pretty cool. Somehow God is extending and saying, my presence was limited here, but guess what? Now, God's presence occupies the entirety of this space. Not just one person gets to enter. Everyone will encounter the close proximity of deity within this tabernacle that is being presented to you. Follow me? Pretty cool. But proportionately speaking, this heavenly space is roughly the size of the moon. It would span, say, Maine to Florida or Albuquerque to Spokane. That's how long, wide it is. And we will see it coming down from the hands of God. This is interesting, not necessarily biblical, but based on dimensions, based on that idea, one scholar speculates that it could be 396,000 stories high and roughly equals 2,250,000 square miles, all divided into separate condominiums or something, dwellings, for the whole body of Christ to be together in this city. Now, some scholars say that this new Jerusalem is like a bridge between the new earth and the new heaven. And we will flow between them through this holy city. And it is widely believed, I only say this because most of the scholars agree, that the streets could be horizontal and vertical, which means there could be multi-dimensional travel, which could mean that we could be transporting as Jesus did so effortlessly in his resurrected body, right? And we're going to talk about more of that in a minute. But let's get back to the wall. Let's get back to the visual. The wall is made of jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. Constantly, there's this reference to crystal clear that John uses. It appears that this city is designed as one scholar said, to transmit the glory of God in the form of light without any hindrance. Okay. So the foundation of the wall of the city is decorated with 12 of the most beautiful gems. And Dave's going to throw up another. I'm not going to list the gems, but here are the 12 that are included. Let me just take a moment and look at the coloring. Look at the brilliance. And this is an image. This isn't even the reality, right? This is an image of all the colors that will be used to cover this wall. Now, you can take it down anytime, but while scholars agree we should literally accept the concept of God using jasper and gold and all these other precious gems to embellish the city, we still can't begin to imagine it. Because you have to add to these the freshness that we talked about of God's new design, the atmosphere. You add that to these gems, and then you add the brilliance of his light illuminating presence into it. It's unimaginable, but you get a glimpse of the overwhelming beauty, sparkle that it's going to be. But it's interesting because these gems also seem to represent something special. In the Old Testament, going back, a high priest would wear what they called an ephod, which was a breastplate lined with 12 jewels, and they were to wear that when they were convening with God, right? It had way more details to it, but it had 12 jewels. It symbolized, this ephod with the 12 jewels symbolized the priest's authority and role as mediator between God and the people. Now, fast forward to the New Jerusalem, these 12 gems represent the eternal reign of what we know Jesus is referred to as our chief high priest. So it's not only one person anymore. Everybody will now encounter the chief high priest, the presence of God, because these jewels represent that inclusiveness once again. There's all symbolism throughout this Revelation 21. It's about inclusiveness. It's not about separation anymore. It's about reminding you that God's presence is available to everyone, everywhere, now at all times. And this wall is a massive 216 feet high. Some say it's deep. I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to go with most scholars say they think it's 216 feet high. Each gate is made of a single pearl. That's a lot of sparkle, right? I wasn't going to go here, but I'm going to do one quick tangent. One scholar made this reference. Why a pearl? I'm not going to do it justice, but a pearl within an oyster begins to take shape because of an irritation. An oyster, when there's a piece of sand or something that gets into it and it starts irritating the oyster, it sends out these materials that surround the irritation to protect the oyster. So within that pearl, it started with an irritation. Why pearl for a gate? Because it's a constant reminder that Jesus had to surround sin. That irritation of sin had to be surrounded by Jesus. And that pearl is supposed to be a representation every time we walk in or out of that gate that you're here because Jesus covered that irritation of sin for you. Moving on. So John his gaze moves from the outside of this exterior. Now he's moving his gaze into the gates. And he says the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. Once again, the diamond-like material maybe, but transparency is key. And as you walk along the streets, there's a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, there again, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. And it runs down the middle of the city. So this provision of life-giving water is straight from God's throne, meaning that it's pure and it's endless, and it's a symbol of constant peace, peace like a river, right? Verse 2 of Revelation 22, we're going into 22 now, in the middle of its streets, and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each yielding its fruit every month, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for healing of the nations. That's interesting. Why do we need healing in heaven? We're going to get to that. But this is a hard to picture landscape here, and scholars widely disagree as to whether there's a large street with a river down it, like a canal, and a series of trees that go up and along, which makes sense because it says each tree yielding its fruit, right? Others say it's one single tree that yields multiple fruits at the same time. We don't know. But what we do know is the Bible begins with a tree of life and ends with a tree of life, right? What was once the source of sin will be restored now to be the source of life. But the best part of this verse is we get to eat in heaven. So many people are like, do I get to eat in heaven? Well, yeah. But it's a new God-designed, untainted, lack of pesticide sprayed fruit that's going to be available every single month, new and fresh every single month. That means the best of the best foods, always in season, always on time. No more rummaging through the produce and getting the rotten fruit out of the way, or getting one and it goes bad. No more guessing if you're getting a good watermelon. I hate that. Can you imagine also just hanging out with the heroes of faith that we've talked about? All these people. Hey, Abraham, pass the potatoes. Hey, Moses. Hey, here's an apple. Tell me about that burning bush. I don't know. It's just so interesting to me to elaborate on some of those ideas. Anyway, and it appears based on this verse, heaven still marks time in some sense because it says every month, right? But we will not be subject to it in the same way that we are here on earth. But notice, let's go back to the end of that last verse. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of nations. Skeptics and doubters say, see, there is no perfect heaven. There's still a need for healing. Well, that's not true. This is why Greek matters. John uses the Greek word therapeuin for healing here. It's where we get our English word therapeutic. It's not healing in the sense that we understand. It simply and quite literally means health giving. It's not a wound or an ailment or something that needs to be healed. It's just constant health giving, the source of life. So visually speaking, heaven will overwhelm our earthly senses. But the final point I just want to drive home today is heaven will be an eternal paradise with endless rewards. So Jesus referred to heaven as paradise himself when he told the criminal on the cross next to him, truly, today I tell you, you will be with me in paradise. And the Greek word for paradise literally translates to mean garden or park or Eden. So just imagine Bouchard Gardens or some of these most beautiful, elaborate Manitou on steroids, with the most decorated, beautiful sunset, the most vibrant waterfall around, the most sparkling diamonds all around it. This is the garden. This is the paradise that Jesus is describing. And before I talk about what we will get as rewards in heaven, let me just highlight a few things that John talks about that we won't have to deal with in heaven. And we're going to go back a little bit to Revelation 21. These are no particular order, but the city will have no streets. There's no street lights. So there's no sun, no moon. It's all lit by the glory of God. That means no more daylight saving times, which I'm very excited about. No more death. The feeling of loss is gone forever. No more funeral homes, tombstones, none of that. No more mourning or weeping. No more tears. Whether it's misfortune, whether it's sorrow, whether it's loneliness or regret, all are going to be wiped away. If your heart is overwhelmed by life, remember this is not as good as it gets. No more pain physically. No more need for painkillers. All of it gone. No more curse. No more bad attitudes. No more sinful nature. No more struggling with lies, no more sin, no more fear of consequences, no more fear of our inadequacies, all of it gone. No need to say I'm sorry, no more being hurt by others or struggling through forgiveness. There's also no more need for a temple or a sacrifice. Jesus, that temple is there. Sacrifice is done. Once and for all, done. Why? Because as Isaiah 65:17 predicts, God will create a new heaven and a new earth, and the former will not be remembered or come to mind. That's a very, very poignant verse. God's ultimate answer to the ultimate problem of man's sin is to start over. And it isn't that we will have no memory of our earthly lives, but one scholar writes this. He says it best. It is likely only our past troubles will be forgotten, not all of our memories. Our memories will be cleansed, redeemed, healed, and restored, not necessarily erased in the presence of God. Sin, pain, sadness, and such are erased. And I love what Charles Spurgeon said, because I think one of the most common questions is, will we recognize people in heaven? Well, somebody asked Charles Spurgeon that, and he blatantly said, do you think we'll be more stupid in eternity? So there's going to be, you are still you. You're the best version of yourself. We will recognize people, right? But the new environment of our eternal home will be so spectacular that we will forget about the drudgery and the sin on earth. In the presence of Jesus, the Son, so much of that, none of that will matter. So that's a little taste of what we won't have to deal with anymore. But here's what we will get to do based on Revelation: eternally serve him with this heavenly assigned roles that fit our personality and our giftings. You're still going to take Jesus. God created us in the womb. He formed us on purpose, not to change us drastically. Who we are becomes complete in heaven. And we get to serve him in our personality, in a role that fits our giftings, right? One scholar wrote, believers will have jobs in heaven, just as the angels have jobs and special jobs that they carry out according to worship and adoration. The angel who spoke to John called himself a fellow servant with you. There are no unemployed angels in heaven, and there will be no unemployed saints. The jobs will not be drudgery, but they will be incredibly fulfilling. No more competition or need to rise the corporate ladder. No comparing who's better, who's not. We're just going to operate within the standards of who we were created to be, and that will be content. It will be life-giving. We will also get our new heavenly bodies. Can I get a hallelujah? Mine will be taller. Probably not, but I like to dream. But 1 Corinthians 15, Paul compares our earthly body to a seed and our resurrected body to the plant presented at full growth from that seed. That's the illustration that he uses. So while our present bodies are adapted for the environment of time on earth, our resurrected bodies will be adapted for the environment of eternity and heaven. So we have to go through some physical change to be able to fit into and exist in this new environment, this new atmosphere that God's creating. But Philippians 3:21 says that in heaven, Jesus will take our weak mortal bodies and change them into glorious bodies, specifically saying like his own. So our new body will be like the resurrected body of Jesus. And what do we know about the resurrected body of Jesus? It does a lot more than his physical body could have, right? And then 1 Corinthians 15:43 tells us that our broken and weak bodies here on earth will be raised in glory and power. I'm personally hoping for a really cool superpower. But there's reference after reference to new bodies, new over glorified, I mean, anything we can imagine that Superman, Batman, Fireman, all those people can do, I bet we're going to be able to experience. And scholars say that we're not going to be limited by this gravitational or electromagnetic forces. Therefore, it will be easy if the streets are vertical and horizontal for us to transport according the way Jesus transported to heaven, the way his body, he just lifted. See ya. Our resurrected bodies are to be like Jesus. We will probably have those capabilities. But obviously, that means we're healed from all the physical ailments of our earthly body. Those who never walked on earth are going to walk in heaven. Those who were never able to see in heaven are going to have the first thing they ever see to be so brilliant. They won't have anything to compare it to. But again, you're still you, but your body is upgraded to perfection for this new environment. And that's not just our physical body. That means our mind as well. That means the lies that we've battled, they're gone. That means the insecurities that we battled. That means the walking into a room and forgetting why I came here. All gone. Depression, anxiety, insecurity, all of those things, all of the mental disorders that have blanketed the creation of God's people through deterioration, that's all gone. And it says we will worship in heaven. His servants, not only are we serving him, but we are worshiping him. An amazing, unending worship service. Can't even imagine. He also says, John says, we will see the face of God without dying, because in the Old Testament we don't, but you cannot look upon the face of God without dying. But I love, again, what Charles Spurgeon says. He writes, not only will we literally and physically look into the face of Jesus, but spiritually, again, see is to discern clearly here. Spiritually, our mental faculties shall be enlarged so that we shall be enabled to look into the very heart, soul, and character of Christ so as to understand him as never before. That makes me want to cry. Maybe there's a tear in heaven on that joyful behalf, because I can't, to know what I know now, but then to have my faculties so enlarged to grasp so truly all of it. It also says we'll have his name written on our foreheads, so there's no more identity crisis, no more wondering who I belong to, do I belong, where do I fit in, none of that. All of it's gone. But the most amazing, unfathomable reality that overrides all of this is that we will be forever in the presence of the Father. None of that will even matter when we realize we are in the presence of the Father. Back to Randy Alcorn, I'm going to quote another space from his book, Heaven. He says, we may imagine we want 1,000 different things in heaven, right? We all think, I want my body to be taller or whatever. We may imagine we want 1,000 different things, but God is the only one we really long for. His presence brings satisfaction. His absence brings thirst and longing. That's what we encounter here, right? Our longing for heaven is a longing for God. Every other heavenly pleasure will be secondary to his presence, which is God's greatest gift to us, himself. So the gems, the gold, the crystal clear river will pale in comparison to that moment that we understand that we are gazing upon the presence of God and the one who suffered and died that allowed for us to be there. Do we understand what an honor that is? It's going to be a forever presence of love, forever presence of joy, a forever presence of peace. Yes, we have access to him now, but it will be unlimited and untainted and uninhibited by our own human self. And all this newness that we will encounter will stay new. It's permanent. Kind of brings the reality of the lyrics to Amazing Grace to fruition, where he writes, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days at that point. We've no less days at that point, just even after 10,000 years, to sing God's praise than when we first began. So an eternity with an incredible environment, hanging out with an incredible God, with the most incredible version of ourselves. But it's worth mentioning the important fact, this is what Jesus left. That is what Jesus left, that perfect environment, that glory, that paradise, to come to earth and suffer persecution and beatings and death so that we could go be with him there. Paul tells us that we need to set our minds on things above, not on earth. Do you know heaven is rarely taught in churches anymore? Because people don't want to offend someone who might think it's a state of mind or other misbeliefs or conceptions they might have. But if we don't teach about the reality of heaven, people will create it here on earth for themselves. They create their own environment to get rid of pain and provide the ultimate nirvana, so to speak, which is not achievable here on earth. But let me close with this concept. The realities of heaven should be a source of hope. It should be a source of peace and excitement that this isn't as good as it gets. The reality of the overwhelming presence of God has not and cannot be encountered here as it will be in heaven. But it should also, beyond give us hope and peace and excitement, it should motivate us like never before while we're on this earth, to share the truth of the Savior who gets others into.